A Lady's Choice.
Written by Fanny Finch and published by Starfall Publications. Save more with our offers and bundles on our website, starfallpublicationsbooks.com. Subscribe for more audiobooks. Enjoy.
Chapter 1. Emma looked around the ballroom for her cousin, Lady Camilla Fielding. The crowd was not yet as plentiful as it would be soon, and she could tell Camilla had not yet arrived. She looked down at her gown and ran her eyes over her gloves, trying to do it as inconspicuously as possible. She had to look perfect tonight. Her father had warned her. This was the season when she would need to find a suitor. By the end of the season, it was imperative that she be on her way to wedlock, if not already there. She lifted her eyes and stared blankly in front of her, remembering the conversation before she'd left for the ball with her mother and younger sister. Her father, Aaron Michael Wentworth, Duke of Corning, was not a young man. He wasn't a young man when he married her mother, and was even older when he married her stepmother, 2 years after her own mother's death. With the second Duchess of Corning, the Duke had taken on the responsibility of her daughter, Catherine, who was only 2 years younger than Emma. The Duchess was also a widow, having lost her husband in the war. They had 2 twin sons, Michael and Thomas, 6 years ago. His health was ailing. Only those closest to the family knew the true state of things. He'd called her into the parlour where he was seated in front of the fireplace, his legs covered by a thick blanket. He looked so old to her. She knelt by his chair and rested one small hand on his knee. She tried not to wince visibly. Touching his leg was like grasping the bones of a skeleton. It cut her to the very core. "Papa," she whispered, "are you feeling all right today?" The Duke of Corning smiled down at her. It was a warm smile, though weak. "I am as well as I expect to be, my dear," he said, his voice soft. She wanted to hug him but was afraid it would hurt him. "Can I get something for you? A cup of tea?" Her father reached out and touched her cheek. She stared at him with tears brimming in her eyes. "You look beautiful tonight, daughter," he said. "As you can see, my health will not hold up for much longer. You must marry soon. You must find someone who is willing and able to care for our family. And I am hoping you find a man who fills your heart with happiness and love. I fear you will become unhappy. I do not wish that for you." "Oh, Papa, I do not want you to go." Although she cried the words aloud, she sometimes thought she would rather he go live in the vast, beautiful rooms of heaven than stay on this earth in the state he was in. But when confronted with the fact that he would soon leave her, the urge to keep him in her life was overwhelming. "I love you, my daughter. My time will come soon. I do not want to worry about you in my last days. Please, find yourself a good suitor so that I can be assured you will all be taken care of and loved the way you deserve." "I will try, Papa. You know I will." She'd been trying, but not as much as she could have. She did not want to talk to men about trivial things, passing the time with small talk. How could she possibly find out the depths of a man's soul, the way he thought about life in general and the people around him, how he treated those of less than equal standing to him in society, without spending real time with him? These were things she wanted to discuss and witness for herself. Gossip of the ton bored her. The men expected her to be polite, giving, obedient, but also quiet, and something for them to look at. She wanted something more. She spent a lot of her time in the library, reading. There were so many interesting things to read, and she wanted to talk about those things. She learned so much from reading, the talk of the ton bored her to no end. She did not care to gossip and flutter about like a bird without a brain. She wanted to talk about interesting things. So she stood at the ball by herself, waiting for the room to fill up, for Camilla to come, and for the men to begin approaching to be on her dance card. She had not had any trouble filling her dance card in the past. Finding men to dance with was not a problem. She had a good figure, was of good height at 5'1", and was pleasant to look at. Her slender face was offset with 2 beautiful blue eyes and long curling blonde hair that she typically kept piled up on her head. The Duchess of Corning always made sure she wore the most flattering gowns. She knew it wasn't her behaviour or looks that were the problem. Finding an interesting suitor who would not bore her with talk of cards, the weather, and other generalities. That was the problem. She gave a sigh of relief when she saw Camilla enter the room. She hadn't heard her cousin announced. She lifted her hand in a wave. Camilla saw her. A bright smile crossed her face. It was the kind of smile that made the recipient of it feel like they had won the highest honour of the land. Camilla was a tall girl at 5'5", but not so tall that it made her uncomfortable to dance with. She was slender, and her mother dressed her in beautiful dresses that never ceased to stun the men who laid eyes on her. She had long brown hair that was either piled high on her head and adorned with jewels, or swept back into a thick braid, also adorned with beads, chains, and other ornaments. She crossed the room, coming directly to Emma. She leaned forward, giving Emma air kisses on both cheeks. "My dear cousin, you look absolutely gorgeous tonight. I am impressed." Emma smiled wide. "And you look beautiful as always, Camilla. I am so pleased you are here. I have been quite bored waiting." "You arrived early," Camilla said in her defence, her smile never wavering. "How is your father's health?" Emma lost her smile and shrugged gently. "He is not well, Camilla. It is quite unfortunate. I will dearly miss him when he is taken from us." "Yes, I know you will. I will too. He has been like a second father to me. He has informed me that I must have a husband by the end of the season. I must say—" Her voice cracked a little and she looked up so the tears would not fall. She did not want red eyes. "I do not know if he will make it till the end of the season." "Oh, Emma, I am so sorry." Emma nodded, gaining control of her emotions. "I will survive, Camilla. Thanks to you and my aunt and uncle. I am dreading the day, but he will be so much happier in heaven." "Yes, he will." Lady Camilla nodded in agreement. "Oh, look, here come the Duke of Andries and his cousin. You know they will be asking for a place on our cards. Get yours out of your handbag. Have it at the ready. My mother says they are quite eligible, and both have a purse that is not to be sniffed at." Emma reluctantly removed the card from her handbag. The Duke of Andries and his cousin, Mr. Bonds, were both handsome men and said to be excellent in business dealings. They treated others fairly, such was the word, and could be trusted when asked for advice. But she was not looking to fulfill a business transaction. She wanted to find a man to love and cherish, one who would return her passion, a man who would make her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. She hoped it was not too much to ask for. She would know that man when he came along, she was sure of it. The Duke of Andries stopped a few feet from the two ladies and bowed at the waist. "Lady Wentworth, Lady Fielding, may I introduce my cousin, Lord Reginald Bonds. He has come to South London for the season. May we have a place on your dance cards?" "My lord, how do you do?" Camilla dropped into a small curtsy and handed him her card as he was closer to her. She glanced at Emma expectantly, prompting Emma to hand her card to the Duke of Andries. "Yes, oh, here," Emma stammered, her face flushing in embarrassment. The Duke of Andries pressed his lips together to hide a grin, taking the card from her. He placed his name at the top of the card, but for the second dance. She took it back from him, looking down at it. The second dance. He did not want to open the dance with her. She pulled in a silent breath and smiled at him. "I will see you later then, Your Grace." The Duke of Andries kept his eyes on her as he took Camilla's card and placed his name on it for the third dance. Before moving away from the ladies to mingle some more, he stopped in front of Emma and leaned down slightly so he could speak in a low voice, and only she would hear. "I am spoken for to another for the first dance, my lady," he said. "I do not wish for you to believe I am not willing to open the ball with you. You are a fine dancer and a fine young lady. It will be a pleasure to acquaint myself with you again this year." He moved on as soon as he was finished with his short speech, not giving her time to respond. She watched him go, the tips of her lips turned up in a pleasant smile. The Duke of Andries was not unfamiliar to her. He had danced with her for several of the past seasons. They got along well, but there had never been a spark between them. So her search continued. She swept her eyes over the room and spotted two men coming in that she did not recognize. She leaned closer to Camilla. "Camilla, do you recognize those two men there?" She turned her eyes in the direction of the men, not willing to point, which would have been terribly impolite. Camilla looked over at the men. Without looking back at Emma, she shook her head. "I do not know either of them," she whispered, barely audible to Emma. "But they are certainly fine on the eyes." Emma could not hold back her smile. "Yes, they are." She would do her best to flirt as she was supposed to be the refined young lady they wanted her to be. But she desperately hoped to find a man with some personality. She wanted to be in some control of her life and to be able to paint and grow her favourite flowers in the garden. She didn't want a dictator. She wanted a man more like her own father. Her father had always treated his women with the highest respect. He had chosen two fine women to love, marry, and have children with. Emma respected her stepmother and younger half-siblings. They were kind to her, and she returned the favour. She didn't consider her stepmother's forceful ways to be unkind, though. At times, she felt the Duchess was a bit too harsh. She knew the woman behaved that way because they shared a love for her father. The Duchess of Corning could be dictatorial in her methods. Emma believed it was because the Duchess wanted Emma to marry a wealthy, well-bred man, worthy of her status as the eldest daughter of a duke. She sometimes wondered if her behaviour would stay the same once he was gone. Would the Duchess still give her the same respect and love? She hoped so. If she was to sacrifice her life and marry for money, the Duchess had to treat her with the respect she deserved. If she did not, Emma would make it very difficult for her, providing only a small allowance to live on. After all, it is her husband who would be providing the money to her to give to the Duchess. In the end, it would be his decision how much the family would receive. She would be sure to have great influence over the decision. The Duchess of Corning herself had no money of note. She gained her status as Duchess only because of the Duke of Corning. Her late husband had only a title in the military, having reached the rank of second lieutenant before his death. He left nothing behind for her. For months, the Duke of Corning had struggled with his business accounts. As his health failed and he became iller, he did not function the way he had when his mind was clear and he felt no pain. He had lost clients, deals, and a great deal of money in a short period of time. Only the Duchess, Emma and Catherine knew that the money was slowly being depleted and they would soon feel the need to start selling valuable possessions to continue their lifestyle. The two men were making their way across the room. Emma could tell they were not moving quickly and had no intention of coming directly to her and Camilla. She strained her ears as they moved closer, trying to hear an introduction. As they got closer, she was sure she heard the word Duke. She did not know to which man the word was directed. Finally, they were just a few feet away, chatting with another man, someone Emma recognized by appearance but could not come up with a name for. She felt Camilla grip her elbow tightly, signaling the men were coming over. She did not need prompting. She was well aware of their approach. She braced herself and cleared her throat softly. She smiled as they got closer. "My ladies," one of the men said, bowing, "may I introduce myself? I am Lord Baldwin, Duke of Lox. This is my closest companion, Lord Christian, Duke of Rabney. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance." "Likewise, I am sure," Emma said, using her most pleasant tone. She curtsied, bowing her head respectfully. "Your Grace, I am Lady Emma Wentworth, daughter of Duke Wentworth of Corning." "My lady!" He took her hand and bowed to her. She moved her hand to the Duke of Rabney, who took it and also bowed. "I am Lady Camilla Fielding, daughter of Duke Fielding of Cooksey." "A pleasure, my lady." The Duke of Lox bowed to her. The Duke of Rabney also repeated the motion. As soon as the men introduced themselves, Camilla was holding her card in anticipation of being asked for a dance. Emma was a little embarrassed for her cousin. The look on her face betrayed her attraction to the two men. Emma hoped the same look was not on her face. She would not worship a man as if he was a god. That was the look Camilla was giving them. Lady Fielding, may I place my name on your dance card this evening? Yes. Thank you, Your Grace. Camilla immediately held out the card, smiling at the Duke of Lox. Emma could not help it when a streak of jealousy passed through her. She wanted him to sign her card, but Camilla was much too quick with hers. Amusement followed the jealousy, and she handed her card to the Duke of Rabney. He smiled and took it from her. The men switched cards and placed their names on both before handing them back to the ladies. "It will be a pleasure to get to know you better," the Duke of Lox said, smiling as he and the Duke of Rabney tipped their heads and moved on to the next group of people, both clasping their hands behind their backs. "I wonder where he came from," Camilla said, excited. She was staring at her card, obviously enamoured. Emma looked at her and then down at her card. A chill ran through her. The Duke of Lox had signed up for the last dance. It was the longest of them all, and most people believed the last dance was the highlight of the evening. There were other open spots on her card. The fact that he chose the last dance was significant. "Camilla, do you have the last dance taken?" she asked, moving her eyes to her cousin's card. Camilla looked down at it. "Yes, it was that man, the Duke of Rabney. He signed up for it." Emma grinned at her cousin. "The Duke of Lox signed up for my last dance." "Oh, Emma, this is exciting. 2 fresh faces to South London during the height of the season, obviously eligible suitors. Where have they been hiding?" It was a fair question. Emma had heard of both provinces, Lox and Rabney, but had never been introduced to someone from either place before. Would it not be so exciting if we were to be courted by the 2 most handsome men in all of the ton? Camilla's voice was so high-pitched, she sounded like a much younger girl. Emma kept up the effect, giggling like a child. "Oh, Camilla, it would be so wonderful. The Duke of Lox is such a handsome man. What if he should turn out to be the man I marry?" "I am praying for us both, Emma," Camilla said, still excited. "I really am. Lady Wentworth." Emma turned when she heard her name. She smiled at the newcomer, a dancing partner for her for at least the last 3 seasons. Lord Archibald Van Dobson, Earl of Caen. "Lord Archibald, how lovely to see you here. I did not expect you at the ball tonight." She leaned in and gave her friend air kisses on both cheeks. "I did not expect to be available this evening, Lady Wentworth, but here I am. You look stunning." "Why, thank you ever so kindly, my lord. You do remember my cousin, Lady Fielding." Lord Caen bowed at the waist. "I do, yes, quite. It would be difficult for one to forget such a beautiful young lady who only serves to accentuate the beauty of her constant companion, Lady Wentworth." Emma giggled, opening her hand fan and sweeping it in the direction of her face. "Oh, my lord, you are so complimentary. I do thank you. It is always a pleasure. May I have a dance with you this evening?" "Of course, yes, I would be so honoured." Emma handed him her card. "How is your Lady Bonneville this evening?" She noticed his eyes went directly down to the bottom of the card. He scowled for only a moment when he saw the slot was taken. Emma saw the look and knew that he wiped it off his face as quickly as he could. He was smiling when he looked back up at her. "Thank you, my lady. She is not feeling well this evening and has chosen to stay home from this event." "Oh, I do hope she feels better very soon." "Thank you. I will tell her of your good wishes. I will see you just after intermission. That way we will both be quite rested." "Yes, quite." As the lord walked away, Camilla gave her cousin a wide grin. "I did not know you were so close to Lord Carnay." "I do not consider myself to be close to him," Emma replied. "We are only friends. He seems quite fond of you." Emma looked at her cousin with her eyebrows raised. "You came to that conclusion in less than 5 minutes," Camilla giggled. "Emma, I have been coming to the dances with you since we first began attending. I have seen you dance with him before. You and I have met him in the street while shopping. I can see it when he looks at you, and I know you can see it too. Do not try to fool me into thinking you do not see what I see." Emma just smiled at her cousin. "I do not know how he feels, but I do know that we are friends. Only friends." Camilla gave her a skeptical look that she chose to ignore. Lord Carnay was an earl, but he was poor, and it was well known he would rather spend his time in front of a canvas, painting some odd object with obvious skill and talent, than hold a job that would put pounds in his accounts. It wasn't that he was lazy, he just never seemed very grounded to Emma. Plus, she saw a resemblance in some of his behaviours and speech that reminded her of her stepmother's authoritarian ways. She did not want a husband who would treat her more like an employee than a wife. She wanted love. That was the only thing that would make her happy. Lord Carnay lived in the east wing of a huge mansion just outside of London owned by his patroness and benefactor, Lady Bonneville, whose advancing age was known to all in their small area of England. Chapter 2. Emma waited all night, dancing with every man on her card for the last dance. She could feel her stepmother's eyes on her as she did so and wondered what the Duchess of Corning was thinking. She hoped she was doing everything required of her. She did not like to be lectured. The Duchess of Corning was known for that. Lord Carnay talked all the way through their dance. He'd started a new business deal with a local merchant to bring goods from Germany and Italy, which he planned to sell to the highest bidder. Emma could barely stay awake through his lengthy one-sided discussion. She was not interested, and if she had not been moving her body to dance, she would have fallen asleep without question. Typically when she danced, she flirted as she was taught to do. She knew her stepmother, the Duchess of Corning, was always watching. She was aggressive with Emma and Catherine, keeping a close eye on both to make sure they were behaving properly. Just like most of the other mothers of eligible girls in society, the Duchess of Corning gave her two girls no leeway whatsoever. She was almost brutally pushy in what she did for them. She did not care what they thought of her methods. She was going to make sure they behaved the way they were supposed to behave. Emma had respect for her stepmother. She was an honourable woman. Not only was she tall and beautiful, with a slender body and fine features, such as big blue eyes and long wavy blonde hair, she was also extremely intelligent and resourceful. When the current Duchess of Corning met her father, the Duke of Corning, she seemed to fall immediately in love with him. There was a small scandal because she was nearly 20 years his junior, but their love proved true. For the first few years, the Duchess of Corning had to endure talk that she had only married the Duke of Corning for his power and money. She had provided two sons, ensuring her husband's legacy would live on through them and there would be a male heir waiting for the dukedom. It would most certainly be Michael, who was 3 minutes older than his brother, Thomas. Despite all the good things about the Duchess of Corning, Emma was also resentful that the older woman was so stern and hard about the rules of the ton. She didn't care if Emma was happy with the man she married, just so long as she was married, by the end of this season. She hoped. She met him near the dance floor, glancing at her cousin Lady Camilla with a sweet smile. "Lady Wentworth?" The Duke of Lox grinned. "Would you care to dance?" "I believe it is your name on my card, my lord. Yes, I am happy to dance with you." He took her hand and led her to the dance floor. They took their positions and waited for the music to start. The Duke of Lox was an extremely interesting man. Emma could tell he was not like any of the other men she'd danced with the entire night. The sound of his voice was like silk brushing up against her body. She felt warm and comfortable with him. Unlike the other men of the ton, he seemed to assume from the beginning that she was intelligent and had something to discuss other than local gossip and clothing. "Please tell me, Lady Emma Wentworth," he said out, sweeping her to the side with one long step. "How has your evening been?" "I have enjoyed myself, thank you, Your Grace," she responded, smiling at him. "And you?" She was keenly aware of how graceful he was as he stepped from side to side. She felt like she wasn't even moving. They danced together perfectly. She looked up at him, assessing his height to be about 5 inches taller than her. She was 5'1" and 1/4. He was one of the most handsome men she had seen in the last 3 seasons. "It has been a splendid evening, my lady, and I have been blessed beyond measure that I end it with a woman as stunning as you." Emma knew she was blushing by how hot her cheeks grew. How very complimentary, thank you, my lord. You are quite welcome. May I ask, my lady, if you have ever travelled to another country, such as the Americas, Ireland, or anywhere else? Emma had never been asked such a question before. She had no response, not immediately. She had to think about it first. There was a pause in the conversation which seemed to amuse him. He pulled away just slightly and looked at her. You do not know if you have been out of the country, my lady. She could hear the laughter in his voice. It made her smile. I am sorry, my lord, I was caught off guard by your question. I have not been out of the country, though it is something I would someday like to do. I have read about it in many of my father's books, though. I am sure you have been, have you not? I have, yes. How interesting that you have read of other countries. I have not met a young lady with that response before. Her smile softened. Perhaps you have not danced with the right lady. He chuckled. I do believe you are right. I think you would enjoy many of the places I have been to. You seem like you would be a worldly woman if you put your mind to it. I would be most interested to hear what you have read about. Thank you, Your Grace. You barely know me, but yet have such a flattering assessment of me. I do appreciate your candour. I speak only the truth, my lady. I do not have time for frivolous games nor frivolous women. Your eyes tell me you are not that kind of woman. Emma raised her eyebrows. My eyes? Do you find that odd? He swept Emma to the side again. She felt like she was floating on a cloud. I must say I do find it a bit odd. Why is that? I have never met a man who has looked into my eyes and predicted my personality. Do you do this often? Over the years, I have developed a keen sense of intuition when it comes to this. The ladies of the ton are not the only ones who must find a mate. I also feel this pressure. My mother, the Duchess of Lox, is anxious to become a Grand Duchess and have many little lords and ladies running about the mansion. Emma giggled. She had never been to the mansion of the Duke of Lox, but could still picture it. In her mind's eye, she saw a grand woman of noble stature, chasing an unruly batch of hellions as they ran through the large hallways of a mansion, threatening every priceless statue and artifact on display. He grinned at her. That does not scare you. Scare me? Emma sounded amused. My lord, it is my duty to marry and have children. I see no reason why such words would scare me. We met a few hours ago. How do you know I am not a dishonourable swindler? Emma gasped. My lord, I would never think of you in such a way. Never. His grin remained. I could be that and more. You do not know. Emma shook her head. I do not believe you are such a thing. You do not seem the type to defraud anyone out of anything. I am sure you are a fine, respectable businessman. Are you? Yes, my lord. I find that most women are unable to hold a decent conversation, especially those who are of lower upbringing, unlike you, my lady. You clearly come from a distinguished family of note. Do you know my family, Your Grace? Emma did not remember ever having heard her father mention the Duke of Lox. She would be very surprised if they knew each other. I have not had the privilege of meeting anyone in your family, my lady, other than the Duchess of Corning. She encouraged me to seek you out. Emma felt a stab of disappointment slice into her. The Duchess of Corning was the reason the Duke of Lox was dancing with her. Her own merit had nothing to do with it. I see. She was correct in her assessment of you, at least from what I have seen so far. Do tell how she described me, my lord. She hoped her voice didn't reflect how she was feeling. If the Duchess of Corning encouraged the meeting, there was no telling what she had told the Duke of Lox. The Duchess of Corning had often endowed Emma with abilities and attributes she did not, in fact, have, making Emma seem to be a liar when she denied the things that were said. Why the Duchess of Corning would make her out to be a liar when she was working so hard to marry her off was beyond Emma's comprehension. She said that you were obedient and kind, and you would be an excellent wife and mother. Emma's high hopes from before were dashed in just a few seconds. The man was typical, just like all the others. Her mood immediately soured. She had misjudged him. He must have seen the look on her face because he lost his smile. Are you not those things? Emma was quick to smile, though it did not reach her eyes. I am all of those things, my lord. But you are not what I had hoped. She thought the words but dared not speak them. The handsome young Duke of Lox would probably end up being a man with the kind of attitude her stepmother had, dictatorial and authoritarian. She would not fall for such false charms and charades. Emma did not mind respecting those in authority, but she wanted respect in return, simply because she was the kind of woman who deserved that respect. She was not a woman of disrepute, nor had she made a habit of being unkind to others. She wanted others to be happy just as she wanted to be happy. For the rest of their dance, Emma's disappointment kept her from paying close attention to what the Duke of Lox was saying. She concentrated on the dance and enjoying how smoothly the Duke of Lox was able to move her around the floor. He was an incredible dancer, she had to admit that. But his statement that she was obedient had stuck in her mind. To her, that meant she would be expected to do whatever he wanted her to do, even if she didn't want to do whatever it was. She could not expect any freedom. That sounded like a miserable existence to her. She assumed there was something he was hiding. Otherwise, he would not put on such a fine act of nobility. Only a man who was hiding something would put on such a display of friendliness. She was glad when the dance was over. The Duke of Lox may have noticed her initial look of disappointment, but seemed to pay less attention to the distance she put between them as he finished the dance with her. Although it was the last official dance of the evening, many people would mill about afterwards, talking as they slowly made their way out the doors. Instead of going toward the front of the ballroom to leave like everyone else, Emma decided to step out onto the veranda, where there were only a few people, many of them in groups of 3. The Duchess of Corning would be unhappy that Emma had disappeared, but she wasn't too interested in what her stepmother wanted at that point in time. She wanted to think. She was disappointed that the man she had initially thought might be perfect for her had turned out to be just another duke who wanted a slave for a wife.
Before we continue into the story, do us a favor. Like this video and hit the subscribe button because it helps very much with YouTube's algorithm. If you want the audiobooks ads free, visit our website and select our bundles to save more. Thank you again. Now back to our story.
She walked to the left, crossing her arms in front of her chest, before she sat on a bench just beyond a row of ferns that ran along the side of the house. When she thought more deeply about it, she did not know why she had come to the conclusion that he might be the one so quickly anyway. It was as though her brain had decided it before she even met him. Her instant attraction to him had been purely physical. That was obvious now. He was handsome to the point of distraction. Her heart had not given her brain enough time to make a logical decision. She had let herself drown in fantasy and reality had hit her with a swift smack. Emma was disappointed in herself. Why had she let herself slip into such a fantasy land? She shook her head. No more. She would trust that God would send her the right man before the end of the season. Her family depended on it. She stood up and was about to go inside to leave the ball when she saw Lord Carney through the glass-paned double doors. He spotted her too and pushed the door open, hurrying to her. "Lady Wentworth, how has your evening been?" he asked, hurrying over to her. She looked at him surprised. "Lord Carn, were you coming to find me, my lord? Did my stepmother send you for me?" Lord Carn shook his head. "No, my lady. The Duchess of Corning is still inside with Miss Catherine, wooing one of the dukes who danced with her." "Oh?" "Yes. I believe Lady Camilla is searching for you, though, unless she has left. I am sure she will realize you are out here. You look a bit distraught. Is everything all right? Did you not have a good time?" "I had a good time tonight. It was a bit disappointing, though." "I am sorry to hear that, my lady. What happened to disappoint you?" Emma wanted to tell Lord Carney that she was disappointed because she had not met a suitable candidate for her hand in marriage, but she knew he was vying for that position himself, and if she revealed her feelings, he might be upset about it. "I suppose I am just not feeling well right now. My father is not feeling well. His health is declining and I am very worried about him." What she told him was the truth. She was worried about her father, and she was just beginning to feel a little queasy standing out in the moonlight talking to Archibald. The Duchess of Corning would not approve. She moved back toward the door, grateful that she and Lord Carney were not alone on the veranda. He knew it was not appropriate for her to be seen with him alone. It made her feel disrespected. It put her reputation with the ton in jeopardy. He should know that. He opened the door for her and she went through, searching the room for Camilla or her stepmother. The Duchess of Corning was on the other side of the room, her back to Emma, with Catherine, the Duke of Lox, and the Duke of Rabney. She was surprised when a streak of jealousy passed through her. The Duke of Lox, to his credit, did not look extremely happy. His eyes were wandering around the room over Catherine's shoulder. He spotted her, and a look of pleased recognition passed over his face. He said something to the Duchess, who turned and looked at Emma. She did not look pleased. Emma wondered why, feeling anxious. She rewound the evening in her mind, but could not think of anything she had done wrong. Had the Duke of Lox said something unpleasant about her, she would find out later that evening. The Duchess was sure to tell her what she had done wrong as they went home. "Excuse me, my lord. The Duchess is waiting for me, I believe." Lord Khan was standing next to her and leaned slightly to whisper without looking at her. "She does not look happy, my lady. I do hope it is not because I came in from the veranda with you. I did not intentionally go out there seeking you. I would not have done that without permission." "I understand, my lord. If that is why she is upset, I will inform her that it was not an intentional meeting." "I do apologize if that is the case. Have a good evening, my lady." He bent at the waist and took her hand, bowing to her. "Thank you, my lord," she replied, looking down at him. When he looked back up at her, she was not looking at him any more. Emma crossed the room to her stepmother, her heart hammering in her chest. The two dukes were still talking to the Duchess of Corning. If they had said something unpleasant, she did not want her stepmother to say something about it in front of them. That would put her in the spotlight where she did not want to be. The Duchess of Corning was not known for such antics, however. She was a respectful woman, even if she did pressure Emma greatly when it came to finding a suitable husband. Emma was sure the woman was doing it for her own good. "Lady Wentworth." The Duke of Lox bowed to her when she made it to their small circle. Catherine moved back, staring at Emma as if her sister's dress was on fire. "Your Grace." Emma curtsied to him and to the Duke of Rabney. Chapter 3. "Lady Wentworth, did you have a chance to meet the Duke of Lox and Duke of Rabney?" the Duchess of Corning asked. Emma looked at her. Her stepmother knew full well that she had met them and danced with both. Emma had been hoping that Camilla would be talking with the Duke of Rabney, but Camilla was nowhere to be found. "I have. Do you know where Lady Fielding has gone? Has she left yet?" "I believe she and her mother have gone, yes," the Duchess of Corning responded. "I have just invited the Dukes to our home for dinner the day after tomorrow." Emma smiled weakly at both men. "That sounds lovely. I am sure we will all have a good time. You will have a chance to meet my father." The Duke of Lox nodded. "I am anxious to meet the man who has so many beautiful women in his home. He is a lucky man." "Thank you, Your Grace." The Duchess of Corning lifted her hand fan and spread it out, covering her smile. "That is kind of you to say." The Duke of Lox looked at Emma. "As I was telling your daughter during our dance, I only speak the truth. However, I must go. The Duke of Rabney and I have business to attend to early in the morning, and I must get some rest." "It was so good to meet you, Your Grace," Catherine spoke up, holding out her hand to him. He took her hand and bowed. "And you as well, Miss Catherine." The Duke of Rabney repeated his friend's actions as the two of them said goodbye to the ladies. Emma was a little nervous that when the Duke of Lox left, the Duchess of Corning would scold her. She should have known the grand lady would not behave that way in public, but it did not keep her from fearing she would. True to form, the Duchess of Corning held out her hands to the girls as if she was rounding them up. "The carriage is waiting, girls. Let us see to it." The women moved swiftly across the room, following the dukes who had just left them. Emma watched the Duke of Lox from behind, running her eyes over his body. admiring the way he swung his greatcoat around his shoulders and pinned it under his neck. There was no need for the extra layer, as it was a warm night. Emma draped her shawl over her forearm instead of wearing it. She did not want to get overheated. Her stomach was grumbling from hunger. She would have Cook make her some pastries if there were any available, and drink some tea before bed. It would settle her stomach and put her mind in a better position to think. There were so many distractions around her, and the queasy feeling had not dissipated after she left Lord Carnay behind. He was being uncommonly friendly towards her. Emma desperately wanted to talk to Camilla about it, and was disappointed her cousin had already left. She would have to wait until tomorrow to talk to her. Her fear was that he would make his way to her father and make an arrangement for their marriage. He was wealthy, making a good income on his investments, and his purse was heavy. But Emma was less interested in the size of his accounts than the size of his heart. She longed for passion and mutual respect. The more she thought about the decline of her father's health, the more she realised that Lord Carnay would not be making a deal with her father. It would be the Duchess of Corning that would sign for her husband. The thought filled Emma with dread. She had danced with Lord Carnay regularly for the last 3 seasons, and never had the inclination he had any intentions other than friendship towards her. Now the thought of taking their friendship beyond that repulsed Emma. It was not that the Lord struck her as being repulsive himself. It was more the idea of sharing herself with him and attempting to love him with all of her being that turned her away. In her heart, Emma held not one modicum of attraction for Lord Carnay that would make her even entertain the idea of becoming his bride. "Emma," her stepmother said in a low voice that implied she was unhappy, "why were you on the veranda with Lord Carnay? What did he say to you?" Emma was caught off guard. She had not thought about that incident. She was probably subconsciously blocking it out. In previous seasons, Lord Carn had just been another face in the crowd. This season, there was something different about him. Emma thought quickly, formulating her words carefully so she would not sound disrespectful. "I was not on the veranda with Lord Carnay," she said. "Not on purpose. I went out there for a bit of fresh air and he was returning from a walk, I assume. We had brief words and he opened the door for me. That is all." "What were his exact words?" The Duchess of Corning had narrowed her eyes and was scanning Emma's face carefully. Emma was taken aback by the look on her stepmother's face. What could she be so worried about? "I am sorry. I do not even remember what was said. I did not want to be drawn into conversation with Lord Carn. He is being very forward with me this year, but I have no interest in him." The Duchess of Corning said nothing. She simply stared at Emma a few more seconds before turning her eyes to look through the window at the night sky, leaving Emma completely confused. The carriage bumped underneath her as she rode with her family back to Corning Manor. She saw the torches burning from a distance and thought how beautiful her home looked in the mist of the night, lit up only by firelight in all the windows. The parlour would be cosy and warm. Her favourite chair was waiting for her. She would have tea with her family and then off to bed. What would she dream of tonight? Who would she dream of? In her heart, she knew who she would dream of. The Duke of Lox, his handsome face, his broad shoulders, his strong countenance. If she were to attract such a man, and if that man were to have the heart of compassion she sought, she would be a very blessed woman. She could not deny she was attracted to his physique. His dancing was impeccable, beyond reproach. But that one word he had uttered, it had been his undoing. Obedient. She did not want to be a man's slave instead of a wife. Chapter 4. The Duke of Lox departed from the ballroom, glad to be free of the crowing mothers and their braying daughters. He was nearly certain the Duke of Rabney felt the same way. From the look on his face when he turned his eyes to him, he was surely not mistaken. "I do hope this experience makes you understand why I rarely attend these events," he said firmly, as they walked quickly to their carriage. The Duke of Rabney looked at his friend and nodded. "I most certainly do. We are the same age, sir. And still, we are bachelors. Our bank accounts are full, and these events are filled with ravenous wolves out to decimate those accounts for the sake of others." "You speak so eloquently," the Duke of Lox replied. "It would seem you have given this topic some thought." "I most certainly have." The Duke of Rabney fell quiet for a moment. They reached the carriage and he said, "I must admit, however." The Duke of Lox could not help grinning wide. He already knew what his friend was about to say. "Tonight was different, was it not?" he asked in a low voice as they pulled up into the cabin of the carriage. The Duke of Rabney looked at him through understanding eyes. "Yes, my lord. It was different, and I do believe we are talking about the same young ladies." "I am relieved to hear you say ladies and not ladies, sir," the Duke of Lox said with a grin. "I did hope we were not vying for the same young woman." The Duke of Rabney shook his head. "No, my lord. These two young ladies were together when we signed their dance cards early in the evening. Lady Camilla Fielding of Cooksey is the lady of which I speak." "Yes, I thought as much," the Duke of Lox nodded as he spoke. "And I set my eyes on the lovely Lady Emma Wentworth of Corning." "Exactly, my lord." "Then we are of like mind? I am glad to hear it." The Duke of Rabney nodded soberly. "We are well on our way to inheriting what is rightfully ours." The Duke of Lox nodded back at his friend and turned his eyes to look out at the cloudy night sky. The moon was bright when it was able to shine through the drifting clouds. At times, he would see the entire countryside, and moments later it would be nearly pitch black as far as the eye could see. He thought about his dance with the young Lady Wentworth. She was somewhat of a puzzle to him. When they started the dance, she was like all the other females, prancing, giggling, flirting. When he'd asked a question or two, she'd answered with intelligence and understanding. She did not boast in any way, nor did she lie to put herself in a more favourable light. She simply told the truth. And when he had mentioned her stepmother, he suddenly realised he should not have mentioned the Duchess of Corning. He assumed too much. What if the relationship they had between them was not a good one? If the problem stemmed from Lady Wentworth's apparent stubborn-headedness, he could understand. After his comment about having spoken to the Duchess of Corning, Lady Wentworth seemed to become very quiet. She was no longer interested in what he had to say and would answer his questions honestly but bluntly with no embellishment or flair. She complimented him on being a good dancer when the music came to an end, but it went no further than that. She showed no signs of having complimentary feelings towards him. Unfortunately for him, there was nothing he could do until the next event, and simply hoping that Lady Wentworth would be there. Unless he chanced by her in the streets. The chances of that happening were slim. The Duke of Lox rarely ventured into the shopping district of town, which was the most likely place to find a female. Maybe he would have to try out new things. There was no reason he could not meander out that way at some point in time. He grinned at the twinkling stars outside. Perhaps she was looking through the window of her chambers, staring at the same glittering black sky. The thought made his smile widen. He pulled in a deep breath. It was strange to feel this way. It was so different. He was not quite sure if the feeling was real or not. He had never experienced it before. He found himself thinking about the woman, wondering if she was all right and had had a good time at the ball. It was not his business in the least. But he could not help wondering. That made his decision to woo her stronger, and he wondered what he could do to impress her. She had seemed anxious to get away from him, so he had to assume he had some explaining to do. Some promises would be made, he was sure of that. He would promise to never speak of the Duchess of Corning ever again if she would consider him worthy. He shook his head to clear his thoughts. It would be a mistake to entrust his heart and soul to this woman quite yet. He had one more season to go before he was required to marry or lose the majority of his money. He did not think ill of his uncle, who was the executor of the late Duke of Lox's will, for enforcing the marriage requirement. His father, rest his soul, had told him before he passed on that if Nigel didn't have a family, he would not need such a large inheritance. The money would go to charities that favoured women and children. On the other hand, the sooner he was married, the sooner he would receive his inheritance. Of all the women he had danced with for the past 4 seasons, Miss Wentworth was the only one who caught his eye the way she did. He couldn't help wishing he had bought Brisbane and moved to the area sooner. When she placed her hand in his other hand firmly against her side, he felt a sense of completeness he had never experienced before. He wanted to know everything about her. His initial question asking her if she had ever been out of the country was completely due to being nervous. It was the first thing that came to his mind. He had searched his mind for something interesting to say, and there it was, coming at him like a board in a windstorm, smacking him in the head. And she had responded with dignity and class. He admired her honesty. He knew many women who had told odd, lengthy tales of journeys only to find out later they were completely fabricated stories, told to make the young woman out to be more than she was. This included matters of the purse. He was not interested in the type of pushy woman who would insist he pay for all the extravagances of life without lifting a finger to do anything other than eat. He wanted a real wife, not a slave, not some kind of concubine. "What are you thinking, Baldwin?" the Duke of Rabney asked. "I can see by the look on your face you are contemplating something." The Duke of Lox slid his eyes over to his friend and nodded. "I am. I am thinking a great deal about the young women you mentioned earlier. I must admit I do not believe I have ever felt this way about a woman before." The Duke of Rabney frowned as one in disbelief. "No, Baldwin, that cannot be possible." "I do not know why it should be such a surprise, Christian. I propose you think back to when we were just 20 years of age. We were informed together that our inheritance dictates we marry within 5 years or risk losing it all. For the last 4 seasons, we have been searching but have never found a compatible match. That may be because we were perhaps not really looking. I know several women you have introduced to me that seemed like a fine match." The Duke of Lox gave his friend a sarcastic look. "Surely I look different on the outside after having danced with Lady Wentworth?" The Duke of Rabney scanned his friend and then nodded. "Yes, I do admit you look different. You appear much more relaxed. I feel somewhat anxious, if I may say so, but I am glad I appear more relaxed. I am thinking about my future. Perhaps a bit late in the game, but I am finally considering it." The Duke of Rabney gave his friend a dubious look. "You are thinking of marriage to Lady Emma already? Our plight may be important, Baldwin, but do not jump ahead of yourself." "I will be cautious, Christian, and yes, I wish to win her heart. I fear I have my work cut out for me." "Your dancing this evening was immaculate, Baldwin. You need not worry about that. I was impressed, and I have seen you dance many times before." The carriage jostled, making the men sway from side to side, attempting to steady themselves. The Duke of Lox gave the Duke of Rabney a direct look. "I believe it is time to do some repairs on the carriage," the Duke of Rabney guffawed, throwing his head back. The loud but joyful sound filled the carriage. "You mean it is time to purchase a new carriage?" "I understand the concept of living frugally, Baldwin, but at some point you must admit it is time to move on from the old. Buy a new carriage. You can afford it." "I will thank his lordship for not interfering in the private affairs of my estate." The Duke of Lox sounded serious. As soon as the words left his mouth, he joined his friend in laughter. The carriage was not far from Brisbane Manor. The Duke of Lox was anxious to see the soft, warm blankets of his bed. His chambers were always warm from the fire that stayed lit from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. Lady Wentworth. How he longed to dance with her again. He could not forget the sensation of having her in his arms. He wanted more than that. He wanted her as a wife. The way she had changed her behaviour after hearing something she did not want to hear was on his mind. It showed the woman had a spine and was willing to fight for herself. They pulled into the circular carriage path in front of Brisbane Manor. The Duke of Lox stepped down from the carriage, landing gracefully on a street of broken marble. He looked at the broken pieces and wondered why he had ever agreed to have it put around his path. It just made people fall about each other and wore down the horses' hooves. The cost of replacing horseshoes on a regular basis made the path without any value. He shook his head. He would replace it soon enough. He had more important things to think about at present. It was a rare moment when something could make the Duke of Lox bargain with himself. He was easygoing and famous among some circles for being a man who produced real results. That often made him a force to be reckoned with, but every so often he would neglect the simple pleasures he enjoyed, such as this. He had ample time and money to have the repairs done. And it took the face of a lovely young woman to motivate him to make small things like that a priority. Lady Emma Wentworth would make him feel invincible. She may be angry with him right now, but he hoped she would grow to fancy him at least a little. He felt a connection to her as soon as he saw her face. He did not want to say he was completely taken in with her beauty, though he was. Her wavy long hair, her big, bright blue eyes. She was a remarkably pretty woman. He wondered if she knew it. There was nothing more obnoxious than a woman who knew her beauty but had the personality of a coiling snake about to strike. He wanted nothing of that kind of woman. When she showed her backbone by standing up to him, he knew he had to have her. There had to be others vying for her hand as well. He wondered how many suitors called on her. He felt jealous without reason. Grinning, he walked into Brisbane Manor, following his friend inside where they would share a brandy before going to their chambers and trying to get a good night's sleep. He knew he would not be able to get to sleep. She was too much on his mind. The Duke of Lox was wrong, however. He was asleep the moment his head hit the pillow. Chapter 5. Although she was exhausted from her long day, Emma found it very hard to get to sleep. She knew her anxiety stemmed from what the Duchess of Corning had said on the way home from the ball. She did not think her father would approve of what his wife was saying, but Emma would never tell him about it. She wanted him to go to heaven believing his family was close and secure. She lay in bed staring up at the ceiling, remembering the Duchess of Corning's words. "You both looked elegant tonight. I was very impressed, and I think the lords were, as well," the Duchess of Corning had stated after her initial questioning. She commonly began her lectures with compliments. Emma fully expected what was to come next. Her stepmother never wavered from her habits. "Thank you, Mother," both girls replied in unison. Emma could tell Catherine was waiting for the but in her mother's sentence. "But there are still many things you must work on," the Duchess of Corning continued. She turned her eyes to Emma, whose heart dropped. She did not want to go first. "Emma, you do not seem to be trying very hard. The Duke of Lox was interested in speaking with you but mentioned that you were unapproachable. This will not win you a gentleman of his status. You simply cannot behave that way with a suitor as compatible as he is with our standards and expectations. What were your objections to him?" "He spoke about me to you?" Emma did not like to hear that. The man had insulted her to her own stepmother. If he was attempting to win her heart, that was not the way to do it. She furrowed her eyebrows. "Do not scowl so," the Duchess of Corning said rebukingly. "It makes you look ugly. You do not want to look ugly, do you?" "There is no one here to impress, Mother," Emma said, trying not to disrespect her elder but finding it difficult to keep calm. "I am uncomfortable that the Duke of Lox had the audacity to insult me in such a way. I was not aloof. I was merely distracted. I was thinking of other things." "Perhaps you would do well to keep your mind on your priorities, Emma." The Duchess of Corning was using the tone that Emma detested the most. It was condescending, as if she was talking to a baby or a very young child. "As you well know, your father's health declines as we speak. He is a strong man and has fought hard against this disease that is taking him from us. But the time is quickly approaching, and we must secure our future through you. If you continue this behaviour, the only man left for you to marry will be Lord Carney." Emma's mind was reeling. She waged a battle against herself. One side wanting desperately to speak out and tell the Duchess of Corning exactly what she could do with her callous behaviour. The other seeking to be the good girl her father wanted her to be. To Emma, her dear father might as well be already gone, the way the Duchess of Corning was speaking. She did not like that at all. In the end, her temper won out and she spoke out of turn. "Lord Carney has a title in name only. He has nothing to provide." "Perhaps not, but his patroness does. She will leave him her fortune, that is certain. Nothing is certain, Mother. My father is not dead, and I will not marry a man because of the size of his purse just to please you. I will marry for love and for love alone. There can be no other way with me. The Duchess of Corning looked shocked for a moment before regaining her composure. Lady Emma, your father will hear about this behaviour. For the first time in her life, Emma interrupted her stepmother, interjecting in a stern voice. You would complain to my father when his health is so weak? How cruel. The words even surprised Emma, and she was the one saying them. His condition is weak enough. Do you wish to aggravate it further? Are you purposefully trying to kill him? The Duchess of Corning shut her mouth tightly and stared at Emma. She was fighting for the right words. Emma could see it on her face. I do not wish to upset you, Mother. Emma softened her voice. But I am obliged, nay, required to begin making decisions for myself. I do not plan to leave anyone in squalor when I choose the man I will marry. But I will not be forced into a union that will cause me misery and pain for the rest of my life, which I hope is long, God willing. Do you not agree with this? The Duchess of Corning listened to everything Emma had to say, her eyes narrowing with every word. At the end of Emma's speech, she nodded. I do hear you, Lady Wentworth, and I do not wish to harm your father, who is my husband, and whom I dearly love. I believe you know that my love for your father is genuine. Then you will refrain from speaking of this to him. Am I correct? The Duchess of Corning stared at Emma, her mouth open slightly, her lips twisting as she tried to think of what words she wanted to say. Yes, I will not speak of this. However, I am fully aware of my duties, and I will certainly do my best to find a husband before the end of this season, as I, too, fear for the health of my father. But I must ask you to minimize your interference and let me find a man that is suitable for me, in personality, and mind and soul, not just in finances. It appeared the Duchess of Corning could think of nothing to say. Emma was fully aware that she and her half-sister were staring at her as if she had lost her mind. She wasn't quite sure what had happened herself. But hearing that her stepmother and the Duke of Lox had both spoken of her outside of her presence and said less than honourable things about her made her angry. She was just a young woman trying to make her way. They should not have been whispering wicked things behind her back. The Duchess of Corning leaned forward, pointing her folded-up hand fan in Emma's direction. You would do well to watch your tongue, young lady. In my hands, I hold the power that can make your life easy or destroy it altogether. Emma set her jaw, unwilling to return the Duchess of Corning's stare. Her face was flushed, her heart was pounding, and she felt like a disrespectful little girl who was being scolded. She did not like the feeling. She was too old for it. She may not have been completely mature in years, but she was a mature young woman with thoughts of her own. She would fulfill her duties as expected, even if the final decision made her unhappy. But she would still have her thoughts. No one could take those away from her. The next morning she felt groggy and had a bit of a headache. She lifted one hand and pressed it against her forehead as she sat up. Dizziness swept through her mind and she steadied herself, pushing her palms down flat on the blanket around her legs. She looked around her, still a little dazed from sleeping so heavily. As the fog cleared from her brain, she remembered Camilla had invited her and her family to Cooksey Castle for a luncheon. Her father, the Duke of Cooksey, promised some very high-profile men of stature and wealth. Of course, the Duchess of Corning had jumped on the opportunity to meet them. Emma dare not say it, but the Duchess of Corning was still a young woman and would soon be a widow. She would need to remarry if she wanted to retain any type of state in society, since Emma would be the one all looked at once. The Duke of Corning passed on to the heavenly gates. She was probably looking for a possible new husband for herself. Emma was upset that these were her first thoughts of the morning. She wanted to enjoy her day with Camilla. She wondered if any pleasant young men would be there. Try as she might, she could not keep her mind from the Duke of Lox and wondering if he would be there. On one hand, she got an uneasy feeling that he would most likely be there, as the Duchess of Cooksey would never leave out a prominent, wealthy bachelor when she had daughters of her own to marry off. And on the other hand, she hoped he was there. She wanted to at least gaze upon his handsome face. She found she rather liked the nervous feeling she got when she glanced at him and he was looking at her. She had to look away quickly. It made her stomach feel like butterflies were fluttering all through her. As she dressed and pulled her hair back into a neatly combed mane that waved around her pale cheeks, she thought of anything she could think of besides the Duke of Lox. She stared at herself in the mirror and was about to turn and leave the room when an unexpected knock made her look at the door in the reflection. "Come in," she said, her surprise obvious in her voice. No one ever came to her door in the morning. Fear split through her. Had her father passed on? She straightened and faced the door abruptly and tilted her head to the side when she saw it was her younger half-sister, Catherine. "Good morning, Catherine," she said in a low voice. "Has something happened? Tell me quickly. Do not hesitate." She braced herself to hear something awful, but Catherine just looked at her for a moment before moving to stand next to the window, facing away from Emma. Emma frowned. Catherine's odd behaviour baffled her. "Catherine, what has happened? Why are you here?" Catherine turned back to face Emma, her eyes on the floor in front of her. I want to tell you something, Emma. Something I know you have not been told, but I think you should know because she is your friend and cousin. And Emma's frown deepened. "Catherine, whatever are you talking about, dear? Out with it! Are you talking about Camilla? What about Camilla?" Catherine shifted from one foot to the other, looking terribly uncomfortable. "Mother is entering negotiations with the Duke to secure my hand in marriage, and I thought you should know." The thought of the Duke of Lox wedded to her younger sister almost made Emma double over with sickness. Camilla would feel the same if she heard her chances were being snuffed by the Duchess of Corning. She placed one hand on her flat stomach and the other over her mouth. "When did this happen?" she asked, her voice muffled by her hand. Catherine looked at her through pleading eyes. "I cannot object to the union, Emma. I do hope you understand. He is such a handsome man and is in negotiations to purchase a beautiful mansion, though it is a bit run down and—" "But you are not the eldest, and you are not yet 18. I have until the end of the season. And was this decided while you were speaking with the Duke of Rabney last night?" "Yes. Mother says that is when she decided," Catherine responded. Emma caught the words, "when she decided," and felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was not set in stone. It was something the Duchess of Corning had decided and assumed it was a fact because she decided it. "I am sure the Duke of Rabney will consider all options," she said softly. "I agree. I could see that Camilla enjoyed dancing with him, but I think he is more interested in me. And he is such a handsome man. I know Camilla would be heartbroken." "How do you feel about this, Catherine?" Emma said, taking a few steps toward her half-sister. Catherine certainly did not look comfortable with the idea herself. The younger girl shook her head. "I do not want to be betrothed to a man simply because Mother wants it that way. I have my own standards as well. They are similar to my mother's, more similar than yours, but they are not the same. I fear she will take control of my life, and I will be forced to marry someone I do not wish to marry." Emma took her sister's arm and directed her to the bed, where they sat next to each other. "I cannot see the Duchess doing something like that," she said gently. It was almost a lie. She could see the Duchess manipulating a situation to her advantage no matter whom it hurt. But not to her own daughter. Surely she would not do that to her own daughter. Emma thought about it for a moment. Would the Duchess of Corning ignore Catherine's wishes to better the financial situation of the family? She could understand if they were talking about her. She was not really the woman's daughter, but her own kin, her real flesh and blood? Would the Duchess of Corning be that greedy? Surely not. With a nearly silent sigh, Emma put her arm around her sister's shoulders and squeezed her in a tight hug. Mother will not do that to you, Catherine. I know she is not like that. She cannot be that kind of woman. She is smart and kind and honest, though she may be firm a great deal of the time. Do you truly believe that? Emma nodded. You will see. She will not pair you with someone you do not want to be with. And I will say something to Camilla when I see her. I will make her aware so that her mother can step up and insert her into the mix. Will that be all right with you? Will you be hurt if he turns away from you and seeks Camilla instead? Catherine shook her head vigorously. No, no, I do not want the Duke of Rabney, though he is handsome and wealthy. As I said, I sensed there was a connection between him and Camilla, and I do not want to be in the way. I do not want to be his second choice, because my mother talked him into it first. I understand. I will do what I can. I promise. Thank you for understanding, Emma. I must say I feel terrible about telling you all this. I feel as though I have betrayed Mother. No. Emma squeezed her shoulders again. Do not feel bad. You have been honest. You have done the right thing. I understand how you feel. I love you, Emma, Catherine whispered, wrapping her small arms around her sister. I am so glad you are my sister, even if we are not blood. Emma smiled and kissed Catherine on the top of her head. I love you too. You are my sister. You always will be. Chapter 6. Emma felt like the 2 days that passed before the Duke of Lox and the Duke of Rabney were to arrive at Corning Manor might as well have been 2 weeks. The time passed like molasses dripping from a tree. She was terrified throughout the whole 2 days that Lord Carney would pay her a visit, but she was thankfully left alone by him. She spent the 2 days perusing the library, where there were many books she had yet to read. She was interested in them all. Her father had new books arriving for the shelves regularly. She would never have time to read them all. Odd coincidences seemed to bring Lord Carney into the topic of conversation more often than she would have liked. She would hear her mother in the parlour with one of the family's solicitors, and hear his name mentioned. She did not want to eavesdrop, but sometimes it couldn't be helped. Voices echoed at times in the great halls of Corning Manor. As she prepared for the arrival of the Dukes, she thought about what Catherine had said. She wished she had permission to invite Camilla tonight, but when she brought it up to her stepmother, the Duchess had nearly lost her temper. She shook her head vigorously. This is not for you, Emma. This is for my daughter's benefit. This is a chance for Catherine to become better acquainted with the Duke of Rabney. You may use this time to redeem yourself from your bad behaviour at the ball. Emma retreated from that conversation quickly. Her stepmother was more brutal than ever. Emma sensed the Duchess was highly agitated about something different from finances and the health of the Duke. The Duchess had been dealing with those stressful issues for the last year or more. She was more irritated than before. Emma wondered what was causing it. She sat in the window seat, leaning on the side, her eyes gazing out at the front of the house. She could see the road leading up to the house from where she was, and she was watching intently for the men to arrive. Catherine had been quiet the last 2 days. Emma knew why. She was uncomfortable knowing her mother wanted her to give the Duke of Rabney all her attention at the dinner party. As for Emma, she had been instructed several times to redeem herself because of her bad behaviour at the ball. The more Emma thought about redeeming herself, the more resentful she became. Who was the Duke of Lox to speak ill of her and create this problem between herself and her stepmother? Now Emma sat in the window seat stewing, thinking of all the things she would not say to the Duke of Lox. She caught herself grinning. She wouldn't be rude to him. Not at all. But she would not allow herself to be caught up in his web of deceit either. Having met the Duke of Lox and danced with him only one time, she did not know very much about him. She wished she could learn more about him. She had already decided to be extremely observant of him. If he was keeping something from everyone, she wanted to know what it was. He was diplomatic in many circles, so was the talk of the town. Her mother had discussed the Duke of Lox and the Duke of Rabney with one of the ladies who frequently came to visit her. Emma did not know whether the ladies that came to visit could be considered friends to her stepmother. They rarely laughed and were always extremely proper, as if they were conducting business even in their social time. Emma could think of a lot of subjects she and the Duke of Lox could talk about. He had travelled to many places, and she had read of many places. Her heart skipped a beat when she thought about the things he must have seen with his own 2 eyes. Her excitement was short-lived as she thought about his callous discussion of her outside of her presence. She would not believe his friendliness was genuine, but she longed to think of him differently. She did not want him to be rude. She wanted him to be honest and open so that she could delve into his brain and see the things he'd seen. Frustrated by her indecisive nature, she pushed herself up from the window seat. At that moment, she saw the swirling of dust as horses drew a fancy carriage towards the house. It was a topless carriage, driven by a well-dressed driver. The 2 dukes were in the carriage, one on each side. She kept her eyes on the men for only a moment, but did not want to take the chance that the man facing her would look up and see her staring from the window. That would be extremely disconcerting for both of them. She would simply have to make the best of the night. She tried to keep it in mind that she did not know the man well and would need to give him the benefit of the doubt. After all, he was a duke of some note and was wealthy by all accounts. She looked in the mirror before she went down to make sure she looked appropriate. She practiced looking demure and sweet. Before turning away from the mirror, she stuck her tongue out at herself and then smiled. She went down the stairs, her heart thumping against her chest. She wanted to be in the parlour before they arrived. The Duchess and their housekeeper, Gertrude, were standing at the bottom, talking in hushed tones. The Duchess looked up at her. The look on her face concerned Emma. "What is it, Mother? Is something wrong?" The Duchess frowned. "Your father is not feeling well enough to meet the Dukes of Lox and Rabney. He is sleeping and we do not want to wake him from his rest. Dr. Smithson has instructed us not to bother him with any action that might weaken him further." "Oh dear." Emma was distressed. "I will go see him." The Duchess reached out and took her arm gently. "No, Emma, he is sleeping. Do not bother him." "I will not wake him, Mother," Emma responded, unhappy that she was being kept from her father. When the Duchess replied, it was with a gentle tone, one that Emma was not used to. "No, Emma, wait a bit before you go. Let him rest for now." Emma felt herself give in to her stepmother's request. She relaxed some and nodded. "All right, Mother. I will wait until after dinner." The Duchess nodded just as there was a knock on the door. The women turned to look and then moved in different directions as Emma went to the parlour and the Duchess and the housekeeper went to the door to greet the visitors. Emma passed through the doorway and stopped on the other side, breathing slowly. She placed one hand on her chest just below her neck and closed her eyes. She would need to calm down and keep herself together. She crossed the room to the fireplace and stood in front of it, anticipating the men coming through the door with her stepmother at any moment. When the door opened and Catherine came in, Emma was briefly startled. The Dukes and her stepmother came in right behind her. Emma realised Catherine must have been coming down the stairs behind her, and she had not realised it. She had waited with her mother as the Dukes came into the house. Emma suddenly felt a little out of place. Catherine was giving her frightened looks as if she was being set up in a trap. Emma wanted to hug her sister and tell her everything would be all right. For their part, the Dukes were on their best behaviour. The Duke of Rabney did not hover near Catherine, as an interested party might. He stood back and let the Duke of Lox be at the forefront of the conversation with the Duchess of Corning. "I do hope we have not come at a bad time," the Duke of Lox said, scanning the older woman's face. "You look distraught." The Duchess of Corning waved one hand in front of her face, shaking her head. "Please do not worry yourself about me, Your Grace. The Duke has not felt well today and will not be joining us. It is a shame and a disappointment, but we do what is necessary to help him through this." The Duke of Lox looked at Emma, sympathy on his face. "That is a disappointment. I was hoping to meet him today. I am sorry he is feeling ill. I hope he recovers soon." "Unfortunately, recovery does not seem to be an option at this point. We will be praying for him, my lady." The Duke of Lox used a gentle voice. Please do come and sit. The Duchess held out one hand toward the middle of the parlour, where there were chairs of different sizes. Emma had moved to the one closest to the fireplace where she'd been standing. The Duke of Lox thanked the Duchess and walked to the chair opposite Emma so that when he sat, he was facing her at a slight angle. He sat on the edge of the seat with his back stiff. Before he found a seat, the Duke of Rabney stopped in front of the Duchess and asked a medical question about the Duke's health. Emma automatically tuned out. She did not want to hear specifics about her father's condition. She would not understand most of it, and many of the words were foreign and scary sounding. She did not want to know anything other than when he would get better. And, as her mother had said, there was little chance of that now. Emma noticed the Duke of Lox frequently glanced at her. Each time he did, she wondered what he saw. The third time he glanced at her, he smiled. Instinctively, she smiled back. He was already handsome, but when he smiled, his face lit up like a beacon. It was a contagious, humour-filled grin, playful and boyish. Emma liked that. "I enjoyed our dance, Lady Wentworth." The Duke of Lox leaned forward to speak to her. She nodded. "As did I." "I do hope we will have the opportunity to dance again at the next function." Emma detested the confusion she felt inside. She was stuck on the word obedient, but yet he seemed so amiable. With Lord Carnay as an alternative, she quickly decided she needed to give the Duke of Lox another chance. She leaned forward. "My lord, I would like to show you my father's library, if you are interested." The Duke of Lox grinned wide. "I am interested." Emma stood up looking at Catherine. "Catherine, would you like to accompany us to the library? I would like to have the Duke of Lox's opinion on our vast selection." She glanced at the Duke of Rabney. "Would you like to see it, Your Grace?" The Duke of Rabney gave her a smile that resembled his friend's in spirit, if not in looks. "Yes, that would be grand," he said in a light-hearted way.
Scan the QR code or click on the link in the description to read the full book. The full audiobook will be available on YouTube in a few days. What did you like the most? Comment below and share this video on your social media and with your friends. Watch one of the following videos. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell to not miss any new audiobooks. Thank you for watching.